So we do
Yes.
have the last session of the day. I just ask everybody to pay attention. And then I asked everybody to make sure that they are here for 6:10. And thank you, Martin. We're going to let you start your talk with developing therapeutics via decentralized science. I'm going to ask everybody to please, you're going to have a chance to network and have conversations in about 20 minutes.
No.
Martin, go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks a lot, Laura. I know I'm last, and I know I'm probably stopping you all from going out for pints or whatever. But yeah, so my name is Martin Codyre. I'm the Chief Translational Officer of Flemming Protocol. And we're here to chat briefly about developing therapeutics via decentralized science. So the reason I'm here to speak to you all today about translating biomedical discoveries into the clinic. And I'm here to speak about how to do that in the decentralized science way. And so as we all know, right, and as we've heard spoken about quite a lot here today, the translational or even the early stage discovery phase of research is quite broken, both from the scientist's perspective, but also from most particularly the patient's perspective. Now, I come to this world through quite a personal story in that almost 11 years ago, I fell and suffered a spinal cord injury and was paralyzed instantly from the shoulders down. I immediately started traveling around the world, looking at where the state of the art was, trying to find who the best researchers were, who the best philanthropists, who the best business people were, and trying to understand what it's going to take to translate or to essentially fix myself. I came from the world of engineering and algorithmic trading before this, so I was quite technical. I didn't really have an understanding of how challenging the biomedical world was or just how messy it was. But I recently came across and I read a book called Empire of Pain, which goes into the history of the pharma world back to the people who are the origin story of the opioid crisis, which are the Sackler family, where they kind of wrote the playbook for how pharma works today, in that they typically market to medical doctors, and that's independent of whether the outcomes of the intervention that they're marketing is going to ultimately be better for the patients. And while reading this book and also watching this movie or the TV series called Dopesick, which I highly recommend you to watch if you have any interest in learning about how these systems can work. And it's not that every part of the system works this way, but I was screaming at the book and at the TV series, saying like, that's exactly the world that I have been trying to battle against and understand. How can we build incentives to work around this ginormous kind of system that exists with what a lot of people call sick care, right? So to do this, I want to show you this diagram, which a lot of you are very familiar with, I'm sure, because it's shown to any student or any person who's involved in drug discovery. It's the development process and the funnel whereby we discover new medicines, where you throw literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of molecules into a drug discovery process, a screening process, and they generally get whittled down into smaller and smaller amounts at the different stages. And whenever you see this diagram, you can be pretty sure that it's accompanied with numbers like $2.6 billion to get one clinically approved medicine, and possibly 10 years to get that through the system. And it's funny because every time I see these numbers bandied about, they seem to increase by about at least 500 million each time. Last time I looked at it was 1 million, and now it's up to 2.6 billion. So the origin of this story was spoken about, I think, earlier by Paul on the first day, or it was someone where it was a Tufts study. Actually, I think it was Sebastian. It was a Tufts study, and this has continually been added on by inflation, etc. But curiously, once the pandemic happened, we were able to had a vaccine, and this is a bit of a cheat, but all of a sudden we had the vaccine within 2 days. Once the genome of the virus had been sequenced and published on PubMed, Moderna had internally designed the vaccine that everybody took, practically the same thing, within 2 days. They then had this manufactured and had been sent to the NIH for early stage trials within 2 weeks. So how come it takes $2.6 billion and 10 years, typically the numbers that's spoken about, and yet we had it in 2 weeks? Now, the one that everyone took, it did take 7 months to actually do the clinical trials to get that. But my point here is that the molecule or the molecular intervention was available within 2 weeks of the genome being sequenced. There's a disconnect there. Now, it does have to be acknowledged that this all was built on 20 years of research, so it wasn't like it just was immediately magicked up. And part of what we've been talking about here these few days is, did all the people who did those 20 years of research, did they get compensated in the right way? Was that attribution record available so that the people who created all of the early stage lipid encapsulation technology, etc., were they compensated? We don't really have visibility into that, but I think they should be on TV as well, and not just the people who actually were responsible for doing this on the very, very most recent stage. So with that in mind, I want to kind of give you an overview of the way I see this whole system that we're building here can come together and expedite therapeutics into the clinic and improve patient outcomes. My whole world is driven about improving patient outcomes. In doing that, you solve the problem. When you solve improving patient outcomes, the money comes after that. That's what I believe. And the money can be very, very significant. So you see the drug development pipeline there on your left. And we see a few of the projects in the domain at the moment, right? So you can imagine something like what Sava was just speaking about from crowd-funded cures. A repurposed molecule, or a molecule that's been identified that's suitable for repurposing. Maybe it needs to go through some extra toxicology studies, right? So maybe the people within crowd-funded cures, or in OPSI, which is another kind of open science initiative, or in VitaDAO, they've come up with a particular molecule and it looks very promising. Maybe some extra toxicology study or new pharmacokinetics need to be done to it, or new dose dependency curves. And maybe that goes to the VitaDAO, or the LabDAO team. They then produce extra data to facilitate the data that we need to run a clinical trial. This can then be published in a completely composable manner into the DeSci Labs system. And that continually gets updated based on new data coming out of LabDAO or OPSI or VitaDAO. So we're building this whole composable system where everybody's contracts interact and they talk to each other and they update in real time. All of this can be underpinned by products such as the IP-NFT for molecule. Thereby, all of the intellectual property at each of these chains, as long as appropriate, can be secured so that down the road, when we get a clinical signal, this can then be commercialized. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's all composable. It all works together, right? And Flemming Protocol, which is the project I'm working on, we're focused on the patient data side of this equation. But very importantly, the patients are going to own their own data and participate in upside when and if the project eventually gets commercialized or distributed to a larger partner, such as in the NHS or maybe insurers even in the US. So this is how the whole ecosystem can work together. And a very important thing that I really want to talk to everybody here about is how we build this composability into the system, how we build the EIPs for cures. Now, a lot of clinicians have, when I've said these kinds of things to them, they thought I was crazy, and they said, there's nothing open source out there that can end up in a really useful patient product. But one of the kind of North Stars that we talk about at Flemming is the We Are Not Waiting, which is the insulin, the diabetes community, put this together. And of course, none of this is our work. This is all work from the diabetes community, and in particular, people like Dana Lewis. Now that community basically reverse engineered the protocol that a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, spoke, and recognized, I think it was a father recognized that why is his daughter not able, why is the CGM not communicating in real time to the pump to inject new levels of insulin based on what the CGM was telling in terms of blood glucose. So he reverse engineered this protocol and closed the loop. They created quite a sophisticated algorithm that is totally done in an open way. Anybody that wants can look at their data. They gathered all their data, published it all in a very, very rigorous scientific manner, and all of this is available open source. Now, I looked at this and I went like, Jesus, they've been doing that in this world. Why can't we do this in things like spinal cord injury, which was the lens that I was always looking at this through. And then you start talking to people, then you start learning that Medtronic and all the big insulin, the big diabetes device manufacturers, they had to then follow on and build on the systems that the open source patient communities built themselves. They put their bodies on the line based on their own data, and they took risks all off their own back, but provided that to everyone like Medtronic to build upon and leverage to build their systems. So that's a really great example, I believe, albeit in a different domain to the molecule domain, the medical device domain, but a lot of the fundamental principles are pretty much identical. Another project that I believe is quite amenable to this is RADVAC, which is called the Rapid Deployment Vaccine Collaborative, which is a group out of MIT and Harvard who very quickly came together and said during the start of the pandemic and said, we think based on the literature, we can the vaccine there was no vaccine available at this stage. And they were very worried that this was going to this was going to expand a lot faster and a lot more, with a lot more mortality than it actually ended up expanding. So they put together this nasally delivered peptide epitope-based vaccine. And they started running clinical trials, kind of like open trials within their own communities based on this. So I'm just putting this up here as an example of a project that did actually create an open source vaccine. Anyone that wants can go in there, help to update the white paper, and add to the value of the project. So this is where I think that Flemming Protocol can assist projects like RADVAC and also the open diabetes community in helping design the clinical trials with institutional review board approvals, with a lot of expert advice that we will assist in bringing into these protocols. But I think that when you really look at this, we can fundamentally realign how biomedical innovation can happen. This is where you've got patients who actually probably have the best visibility and can provide the best signals as to whether early research is going to work or not, because they're going to want to kind of stake on these projects. And through systems like Flemming, they can provide capital to projects within the open science communities, within all these DAOs that you are all going to be building. But in doing that, they can participate in some of the upside involved in that. And I think that really puts the patient's interests first, but funnily will end up in creating better outcomes for society and for the insurers that in the US pay for all this. And because the patients will have the ability to participate in the upside of this, we're creating this kind of circular economy, and we're harnessing the capitalist drive that I think needs to happen within nearly almost all of these projects that there are out there. So we're kind of trying to tick all the boxes. And that is essentially my summary of how we can all work together and how we should all be communicating and building open systems, composable, that can all interact together. And we can actually make scientists happier in your worlds, allowing people to be intellectually curious when you want to be intellectually curious, be translational when you want to be translationals, and get patients to leverage the risks that they take with their own bodies to participate in the upside that of the science that you guys are all going to create. So thank you very much for your time. And any questions? If not, I'll hand it back to Laura. And
thank you
can
so
all talk
much,
some
Martin. And this was such a. Okay, we're gonna let Sebastian ask one question. I'm gonna leave you with the thing. Just one question because we are out of time.
Thank you. Thank you for that really powerful presentation, first of all, and really commend you on everything that you're doing. I just want to say, sort of as an homage to this idea, the most powerful user group, I think, of these DAOs and DeSci are actually patients and their families. And I think they're the most motivated and have the best incentives. And also, maybe we can imagine a day when everybody is a participant in multiple disease-associated DAOs for every disease that they currently have or any disease that they might potentially have in the future. So I had my whole genome sequence done a couple of years ago, and I found that I and my mother have a significantly increased risk of age-related macular degeneration. So I started learning about it. I'm biased. We may be funding a project on AMD drug discovery. And so, I see a day when we can actually take our health into our own hands, not just personally through diet and lifestyle, but actually biomedical research. So anyway, thanks again for your talk.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? It's about you got to own your own problems. That's what I've learned in 10 years of trying to solve mine. I haven't done it yet. Not sure if I will, but I want to try and help other people to solve their problems by owning your own problems. It's the only way to get it done.
Thank you. Another. That was an amazing comment, Sebastian. Thank you for that.